All right, I'm coming down the home stretch of this 30 books in 30 days challenge. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a 1001 book countdown for you, a 30 books in 30 days themed 1001 book countdown. I don't normally have this many books in each video, and I don't usually do a video every week, but that is what the 30 books in 30 days has done, is made it. So I had a lot of content for the countdown, which is fantastic. If you're not familiar with the countdown, I will leave a card up here for you where you can go and check out the original video. But basically, I'm reading books off of the 1001 books you must read before you die list and slowly making my way through that massive project. It's been a passion project of mine for a number of years, and I started documenting it out here on YouTube a couple of years ago and have been making huge amounts of progress, especially in this month of September. It has been phenomenal. Don't expect this kind of progress every single video because this is not normal. I will have a wrap up of the 30 books in 30 days in the first week in October, where I talk a little bit more about what I did. So, but like I said, the countdown is really benefiting from that. So hopefully you consider giving me a subscribe and sticking around and seeing how far I make it through this massive project of mine. I love having you here and hope you stay with me on my journey. But for today, what we will go ahead and do is put up the numbers, which are 858, which is my grand total that I have left out of the 1,300 books that I have, because of course I combined I combined all editions of the 1001 book list together, which actually gave me 1,300 books to read, and 23. Now, every year at the beginning of the year, I pre-select 52 books and try and make my way to zero, get that number to zero by the end of the year. I have not been successful any year prior to this one, and I did not have a lot of hope that I would make it this year, considering I have been significantly behind. Now, at 23, it's already better than where it was at the beginning of the month, and I have a number of books for today. So it's possible. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's possible. Plus, we'll see how many books I make it through in the last week of September. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The first book that I have for you today is Seize the Day by Saul Bellow. This book was originally published in 1956. Saul Bellow actually has 6 books on the countdown, and I have read 2 now with this one. This book features a main character whose name is Wilhelm Adler, or Tommy Wilhelm, depending on which name he wants to go by. And Tommy's made some bad choices. He has made a number of them fairly recently, including trusting the wrong person in investing some money, and it just is not going his way. He is talking with his dad every day, not living with his wife. He's just struggling. He is really having a hard time. And he is trying everything he can to dig himself kind of out of this hole, but there's also kind of this weird feeling of entitlement with him. And like, if he just went back to his old employer, things would be better, or a number of things that he could do differently. Interesting character, interesting premise. There's some interesting characters in here who are interacting with him, and it is one of those books that I think is going to ultimately be pretty forgettable in the end. The ending did not feel like an ending. I will say that as well. I wasn't very satisfied with where it ended. It seemed like it just kind of didn't resolve anything. It just kind of ended. So I don't know. But with this book, we do get to go from 858 to 857, and it is on my 2023 list. So we get to go from 23 to 22. All right, so the next book that I have for you is actually my book club pick for the month of September, which was Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. This book was originally published in 1966. Jean Rhys has 3 books on the 1001 countdown, and this is the only one that I have read. I wanted this one on the book club because I read Jane Eyre back in July and had understood that this was kind of a prequel or had some of the same characters as Jane Eyre, and so really wanted to read it and wanted to read it fairly close to when I read Jane Eyre. And this book really is, if you've read Jane Eyre, it has one of the most mysterious characters is featured in this particular book. One of the things I found really fascinating is, if you didn't know that this was about the characters in Jane Eyre, you would never have any connection to that novel until the very, very end, because they never really name the man in the story. And I thought that was really clever as well. It really does try and give you a background of one of the women in Jane Eyre and give you a little bit of why, of everything that led up to what happened to her in Jane Eyre. And I don't want to give spoilers because it's really an interesting kind of premise to this. The author definitely gave a very different perspective of some of the characters that are in Jane Eyre, which I appreciated. Absolutely did not make some of the characters in Jane Eyre more likable in any way. In fact, it made it the opposite for me. There's a character in that novel that I just didn't really like very much, and this did not enhance that at all. It is a bit confusing at times. I didn't really always understand what was going on. There's two parts to it. I think the backstory of her was really interesting before she met the man in this story. I thought it was really good. But once that kind of transition happened, it just took some odd turns for me. It wasn't quite the book that I wanted, but I'm very glad that I read it. Because if I ever read Jane Eyre again, I think this will have a slightly different impression, leave a different impression of that book perhaps as well. So very interesting. I would not recommend that you read this first. I would recommend read Jane Eyre first. Someone had mentioned in one of the comments that they read this one first and it changed how they saw Jane Eyre forever. It's kind of up to you. Just know when you read it, if you do read Jane Eyre after reading this, just know it's going to probably be a different book for you. So, but Wide Sargasso Sea was the book club pick for the month of September. And with this book, we get to go from 857 to 856. And it was on my 2023 list. So we get to go from 22 to 21. Not bad. And I'm not done because I have another book for you. I ended up picking up this one over the weekend and I got sucked in and I couldn't put it down for a while. And that book is Brighton Rock by Greene. Greene actually has 8 books on the 1001 book countdown, and this is the second one that I have read. I've read The End of the Affair and now this one. This one I actually like considerably better than The End of the Affair, by the way. It's set in London, featuring a very dynamic set of characters and probably one of the best first lines in this book that gives you an idea of kind of what you're in for right from the beginning. It says, Hale knew before he had been in Brighton 3 hours that they meant to murder him. Okay, so you know something bad. Hale is in a bad spot. You don't know why. You don't know who's going to murder him or wants to murder him. You just know that he's having a bad feeling about whatever's going on. And then the body starts stacking up. It is really a great kind of murder, not detective, because there's not a detective novel. There is a character who's trying to figure out what's going on and is trying to avenge another character. There's a character that they frequently just call the boy, which is really an interesting construct as well. There's components of the mob. Oh, it's just like this kind of this thrill ride of what's going to happen, what's going to happen to these characters, what's going to happen to Hale, what's going to happen to the people that he meets, all of those different components. It was very well done. I was very surprised by this book. I thought it had a great story. I thought it resolved itself really well. It's probably one of my favorite books that I've read in this 30 books in 30 days challenge out there. And it was a little bit longer, but it didn't feel longer as I just got sucked into the story. Very glad that I made the time over the weekend to read this particular book. So with this book, we do get to go from 856 to 855, and it was on my 2023 list. So we get to go from 21 to 20. Ooh, and I did fit in another book. I had read Mouse by Art Spiegelman as part of my 30 books in 30 days project, and after reading the part 1 of that, if you haven't read Mouse, it's a graphic novel about the Holocaust, and it's very, very well done, very brutal, but very well done. I decided to go ahead and pick up this one, The Drowned and the Saved by Primo Levi. Primo Levi actually only has 4 books on the countdown, and this is the second one that I have read. And this one, much like the first one, features his time in Auschwitz, leading up to Auschwitz, and then after, as he wrote this book. And then there's a really compelling component of this where one of his books, Survival in Auschwitz, is being translated into German, and he has a very big conversation with the translator. And at the very end of this book, the most important thing, or the thing that hit me the most, where there are letters in the back of this book that are from the German people to Primo Levi. And I just thought that was something I hadn't read. I have, in the couple of books that I had read, or the other book that I've read by Primo Levi, it's a similar kind of thing. You're talking a lot about the just horrors that happened in this time, but the letters that were in this were something new and something different and something I hadn't read before, and that is incredible. It really, what made me stop and think, they also had a lot about kind of of things that happened even as you're processed into a place like Auschwitz, and the things they do to dehumanize you, because they remove every aspect of your clothing. They shave your hair. They make you a non-person and then put you in these nondescript uniforms at this camp. Did they have to do that? They didn't have to do that. They did that for a wide variety of reasons, and kind of like who the mastermind was behind all of that. It's really a fascinating topic, but is it dark and difficult. One of the hardest ones, as they were talking about after bodies were cremated, like what happens to the ashes, and then they knew what the ashes were because they could see different objects in the ashes that identified it as human remains. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it's just horrible to think about. Absolutely horrible. Weirdly, at the same time, I was watching Band of Brothers on Netflix, and happened to end up on the episode where they were at some of the camps, and that just made it even harder to read this kind of at the same time. It was really strange coincidence that happened, but this is an excellent one. I really want to read the first one in this series, which I guess is the Survival in Auschwitz, which I haven't read, and I want to read that. There's also a lot of references to other authors in this, which helps to have read, like there's a reference to the Brothers Karamazov, there's a reference to Raskolnikov, which I believe is in Crime and Punishment. So there's just a lot of different references to other pieces of literature that I really thought was really fascinating as well. So, but this one was very, very well done. I'm surprised it was published in 1986, so it seems it's not as old as some of the other books I read recently, but so good. But it's just difficult. This is a difficult read. But this book, I get to go from 855 to 854, and it is on my 2023 list. So I get to go from 20 to 19. I'm officially in the teens. I know, I'm ready. I'm so excited, because even now, if I don't read another book off the countdown, which I know I will be because I'm not done with my 30 books in 30 days, it means I just have to read 6 books per month in order to get to 0. Still a lot, but more doable than where I was at the beginning of the month. So that is that one. That's all I have right now, but I am recording this a little bit early, so I'm hoping to have at least one more book. We'll see if I come back or if I just record the ending thing. All right, the last book that I have for this particular countdown is Billy Budd by Herman Melville. This book was originally published in 1924, and Herman Melville only has 2 books on the 1001 book list, this one and Moby Dick, and I have already read Moby Dick, so no more Herman Melville for me. This is a short little novella, and Billy Budd is a sailor who is impressed into service on a ship, I'm presuming for some crime, though they don't really say why. He is known as the Handsome One, and is incredibly well liked among the crew, among the captain, and things just don't go Billy's way. It is very kind of surprising story, kind of a surprising end to this particular book as well. It is just such a short little one. There's not a ton I could say about it. I did like it. I thought it was a bit shocking, kind of what happens to poor Billy, which I'm not going to spoil here, but it was a good read. Melville does like to deviate from the story a bit, and this short little novella certainly does the same thing. It does deviate from time to time, but it didn't remove the enjoyment of the story for me. So, but Billy Budd, a very short little review for a very short little book. With this book, though, I get to go from 854 to 853, but it was not on my 2023 list. So that number will actually stay at 19. And that is the end of this particular countdown. As far as what's next, I'm definitely getting to longer books on the countdown, so I don't know how many more I'll be able to finish over the next week. I have one more week before my 30 books in 30 days challenge is done, and before the end of September. So I have this one, The Music of Chance by Paul Auster, which I could read. I also have available sitting here next to me The Accidental by Alias Smith. This one is a bit longer though, so I don't know. I am a little bit ahead of my reading schedule, so we'll see what happens. But that is my progress for this week. Coming up on the home stretch next week. I'm so excited. So, but as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, thanks. Bye.